She's gone.
Just disappeared. This is a great intro to the podcast. Welcome to Neuroprovocateurs, where one of the three of us is liable to wander off camera and retrieve snacks.
I needed my massive bottle of sparkling water.
We could do a round robin how we'd each introduce the podcast.
Okay. 3 humans. 1. Neurospiciness uniting us all. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not quite right because it's different mixtures of neurospiciness, but like one umbrella of neurospiciness. Yes. 2 are allergic to fur friends, and 1 is covered in fur friend fur.
Oh.
Here we are in the red tent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This feels extremely neurodivergent eat, pray, love.
Yes.
Treat.
Yep. It's the perfect place for that. And this room also seals off with red velvet curtains. It's like it amps all the drama, which is exactly what I need when I'm creating. Because otherwise, sometimes I'm like, oh, is this a little overblown? And in this room, I'm like, no, it needs more blown.
Perfect. The exact right amount of blown.
Hurricane.
I mean, as a pornographer, that's usually my line, but
crimes to jail.
1,000 years.
1,000 years jail.
Should we do something like introduce each other?
I'm Jessica Stoya. I used to perform in porn under the name Stoya, only Stoya. And then I started writing about sexuality and porn and stuff, and I felt like I needed a first name because being a mononym human felt kind of awkward. I've written about those subjects for The Guardian, The New York Times, The New Statesman, half of Slate's sex advice column, and I do intimacy coaching now. And I was actually still having a good time with like doing like pinup and nude photos for OnlyFans, but then we had a international payments issue, and so I don't do that anymore. And it's been interesting these past 6 months being a professionally clothed human. Big life change for me.
Hello, I'm Pam Schaefer. I'm a musician and I'm a therapist and a podcaster and general too many ideas haver. And I am fascinated by the topics of neurodiversity and creativity and sexuality and relationships. And that is why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Laurie Penny. I'm a journalist and an author and a screenwriter. I'm also fascinated by these topics. And I'm really, really excited to be in person in town with Pam on your lovely, extremely extra red tent opium den bed. And I'm really excited to be part of this with you both.
Meep. I'm a firm believer in the 80-20 rule, and I got a solid 80% on my first try. So I'm just going to leave that there and add that I am also fascinated by these subjects and fascinated by each of you, even after years of knowing you, yes. All y'all. So I'm very excited to be embarking on this fantastic adventure.
I would say we are 3 friends talk about the intersection of politics and neurospice and creative work, because we're all different kinds of artists. We've all had interesting spice blends of career, and we're all trying to exist in a semi-public, semi-private way at the strange crossroads of cultural collapse and technological change.
Ooh, I like that we're neurospicy people existing at the crossroads of cultural collapse and change.
Mm-hmm. Because look, I've been writing about neurospice quite a lot lately, and one of the things that has changed in the world is, which has changed a lot for neurodivergent people, is the huge change in how people communicate over our lifetime, and also the collapse of certain social and structural systems, which are helpful in some ways and unhelpful in other ways. And all of this changes what it means to be neurodivergent in the world.
I like that because neurodivergence, I have learned, is also contextual.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I was like, ooh, it dovetails with my introduction. I love this.
Yes.
Is that I was like, ooh, our podcast is all about like neurodivergence and relationships and sexuality and politics and culture and how those collide. But I have learned also that all of these things collide in different ways or expressed in different ways based upon context.
Fundamentally, everything is about everything, which is problematic if you write for a living.
We're the everything bagel.
Okay, speaking of neurodivergence, though, because it's also my current special interest, which is, I believe, how I think that's one of the reasons people know so much more now about the neurodivergent experience than they did even 5 years ago, because, like, guess who sure likes to do a lot of research and tell everybody about it?
That's and I have noticed that I was just like, how do I put it? When people are first either diagnosed or come to an awareness of their neurodivergence, because all of a sudden everything slots into place in like a horrifying and beautiful manner where you're like, wow, that actually sure makes my entire life make a lot more terrible sense. It becomes their special interest for at least a solid year after the initial, and sometimes it lasts for way after that, but that's a very common thing that I've seen where it's not like people are just like, oh, I guess I'm ADHD and autistic. Well, I'm just going to keep on going. They're just like, I must learn everything
I must
about
understand
this.
And it's very, I know family members of mine have been like, are you going to talk about this in every conversation? I'm like, just give me a little time. It's like having, my family was very ready for me to come out as a lesbian, which I never did. Right. But I feel like they were prepared. And I had to come in a couple of times, which was, sorry, Pam. I shouldn't do this while you're
Shouldn't be a spit take.
Well, look, I grew up in Brighton in the UK. I'm a sort of radical feminist, half Jewish journalist, and I only look good with this hair. And it would have been very easy for me personally. And life rolled me, a very strange, let's see what they do with this. But what I'm saying is, I think certain family members were prepared to be we getting themselves ready, and this is kind of the equivalent. Just pay some of that, pay down some of that.
Yes,
it's just
yes.
When somebody comes out as gay or lesbian in slightly later, and then suddenly for about 2 years, everything they have has a rainbow on it.
Oh, yeah, because you go through queer adolescence because you didn't get to go through queer adolescence as an adolescent. So you queer adolescent at whatever time it occurs.
They're like, I'm a gay person and I'm going to the gay club. And you're like, you don't like clubs. But they'll go for a year and a half and then they'll remember they actually.
And then they're like, wait, no, this is terrible and loud.
Before we go too far, I want to mention Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg's newsletter last week was about Jewish gender roles during assimilation, and specifically in a US context, and how all these badass immigrant Jewish ladies were a huge part of the labor rights movement, but also what it means for the Jewish identity in the US. So I'll send that to someone for
please.
the show notes.
Yes.
Big excite. Yes.
Send it to everyone for fun.
Well, yeah, it was weird, when you were saying about your family and coming out as queer and coming out as neurodivergent and the similarness. But I was thinking about that it made so much sense when I was just like, oh no, I just am always manic pixie dream person. And then it was like, no, people just fetishized my neurotype.
Mm-hmm.
Ah!
Yes. And this is what we
extended screaming.
This is what we wanted to talk about for the first session, which was the whole manic pixie dream person.
But also they never get to the part that I've at least experienced where people they're like, oh, I love all these things about you, and then about 6 months in they're like, can you maybe tone them down?
Oh God, yeah. You make it 6 months. It's amazing. It's about 3. It's when people, but also in my life, I've one of the main ways I've masked really has been by not having a lot of long-term and certainly not a lot of live-in relationships, because the closer people get to me, the stranger I am.
It's very that where they find it enchanting at first and novel, and then they're like, oh, you need to sit in a quiet room and not speak to anyone for a while isn't just a fun party trick that you pull out.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, that's not that.
Well, also, if you're not living with somebody, or if you pop up in people's lives at random, then nobody has to see the bit where you have to go and sit in a quiet room.
That part, because like I was saying to someone that like one of my biggest fears is that I don't like to disappoint people because they might meet me when I'm out and about during, say, the hour of the day that my social battery is high.
Yep.
And I've done all the things so that I can person, but then they think I'm like that all the time. And I'm like, oh no. No.
And I think it's hard for other people because, like, I certainly find with the two of you, like, your attention is magnetic. It's really like, I love it when I have either of your attention. Right now I've got both, which is amazing. I don't know what to do with it, but like people
I don't know why I did like a Care Bear Spider-Man at you.
I thought that was just
You
Cthulhu.
enjoy it. That's what you do. You just soak it up.
Bask in our glory, Lori.
I will. Thank you very much. But yeah, like we're also like, we are people who are naturally interested in other people. Like, oh, tell me more about the thing, and we can by accident do a thing where we make people feel really amazing.
Yes.
And then it's not consistent because that's just a small part of how we interact with the world.
Yes.
When I was working under contract for Digital Playground, one of the directors, Celeste, she would basically just like steal lines from Hollywood movies. And I'd been out in LA filming a porn film. And then I was on the plane on the way back, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was on the things you could watch. And I was like, oh, blue hair, cool. So I'm watching, and I hear a line that I forget if I said it or the narrator said it or the other actor said it, but it was totally just directly stolen from this movie. And it was something like, and when she looks at you, it's like the sun shines upon you and everything's warm and beautiful. And then she disappears and you're left in something like that. And it was maybe a couple of years before the Manic Pixie Dream Girl discourse began in earnest. But I was like, oh no, that's not. This is a subtext directed at me about Celeste's criticisms of my demeanor and availability. And she stole it from a movie, which is pretty good.
Well, and also, like you said, availability, there's also part of that. What struck me is that it's like people think that either they have access to us all the time or also that we have access to those parts of ourselves all the time. And we're like, oh no, even I don't get to be this all the time. Like, I nerf myself frequently. I fly too close to the sun and then I have to potato.
That discourse is very, I mean, all of the books and media and films that came out with that stock character in it, then all of them are about the experience of having that kind of person in your life.
Right.
I don't think I've seen really anything that's about the experience of being, because it's not, that's the sad thing really. It's not a made up archetype. It is real, but it's almost assumed that this is a shallow character and you don't have to treat them well in fiction or in real life because there's no substance.
Oh, because we're just filled with whimsy. We are made entirely of whimsy.
You can't live on whimsy.
No.
You can't eat whimsy. People have tried.
You can try. Yeah.
To neurodivergent pipeline.
Yes.
It's and which I think all of us have experienced in different ways, and having one's strangeness fetishized in a specific way.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk about what that's like. Or you.
A million years ago, not actually, but like 15, when the Manic Pixie Dream Girl discourse first started,
Mhm.
the first thing I read was an essay by a woman who was so certain that Manic Pixie Dream Girls did not exist. And she's like, no one is this quirky. No one bounces into people's lives. And I'm like looking at this itemized list and I'm like, I think I don't exist.
Yeah.
No. I like that you're looking around and you're like having some sort of Descartes existential crisis.
Well, that's now you say that though. That's such a the idea that people like this really do exist is, I think it's hard for some people. What I've heard my whole life, because I've sort of existed in public in a slightly different way, like in terms of like sharing stuff about my life, I've been told constantly and still get told that everything I do is fake and I'm making this stuff up and I'm putting it on for show.
Oh
And
yeah, you're lying. You're doing it for
it's a
attention.
bit.
This is like a whole. Yeah. I had a friend that literally was like, I don't think I can be friends with you anymore because you just make up all these like stories about your life, and I'm like, I'm just reporting what occurred yesterday.
When are you going to drop this act? Like
Yeah.
it's like a Goosebumps book. It's like, no, this was my real face all along. It doesn't come off. It's
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
way before I had the language of neurodiversity, I remember telling someone that there were two types of eccentric people I'd met. Some people are just very worried that secretly they're quite boring. And some people are very, very worried that secretly they're an absolute space cadet and people are going to see and everyone will. And I've actually met more people like that who are like, this is an amount of palatable strangeness. This is the amount of truth I can show.
Right.
And this is a way to make it kind of, and the whole manic pixie thing is it's an acceptable heuristic.
Well, and Jess, when you said like it was that they don't exist, like I thought about how at the end of so many movies that feature the manic pixie dream girl trope, they basically do disappear because they've served their role in the main character's life.
Sometimes they literally die.
Yeah,
right?
Sometimes they just kill them off, and so that's also a thing where you're like, okay, that's weird.
I made a living off of whimsy for a good like 15 years, but
You had a great whimsy
rare.
run.
Thank you. And even still, at a certain point, I had to be like, "Oh shit, man! Like, what do manic pixie dream adults look like? Because this doesn't last forever."
That was what I said to I think Jess, I was telling you about this, that, and Laura, I'll fill you in. I reconnected with a friend of mine from high school that he had gone to a different high school. We went to 11th grade semi-formal together. Very cute. He bowed to me at the end of semi-formal when he dropped me off at my house. And I didn't know what to do, so I thanked him. Because I was like, I don't know what to, wow, there's a boy with floppy hair bowing at me.
I love that.
Right? Very sweet human. And we reconnected because I'm never on Facebook, but happened to be on Facebook looking at therapist groups, and it said, do you know this person? And I was like, I do know that person. And it turns out he has been through so much recently. Many, many sads. Yes. So like lost his wife, lost his dog. I feel like he's having like the Keanu Reeves arc.
God.
But yeah, like really, really has had very bad experiences. But what he had said was, I understand if you don't want to talk to me when I'm feeling this way. And I was like, what kind of person would be like, gosh, I'm reconnecting with an old friend and you've gone through sad things. And now because they're sad, I won't speak to you. I was like, oh my God, what kind of person would that make me? That's terrible. And so we hung out, and like we've hung out twice now, but it was funny because I took him up to Barnsdall Park and we had like a picnic at sunset and we ate cheese. It was very nice. But it was funny because he's like, if I didn't know any better, he'd be like, I would think that you were like a manic pixie dream girl, but I've actually known you and known of you for like decades now.
This is just the way you are.
Yeah. And he's like, so I know that you are a person of great substance. But he's like, if someone had just told me the plot points of like, man loses wife, reconnects with 11th grade semi-formal date, takes him on picnic.
I think an ex-girlfriend of mine literally wrote that as a kind of written to order romance novel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like he was just like, it would seem like something that someone made up as that you'd be here to, you know, further my plot line of being a sad white man. Because he very much, I appreciate this, that he calls himself out on this. He's just like, oh no, if that were the trope, I would be Zach Braff. He's like, I would definitely be. And so like, it was interesting because I said to him, I was just like, well, you know, I'm a retired manic pixie dream girl. I was like, we still got the skill set. We're still going to do fanciful things. Like once the sun goes down and we notice that there are bunnies in the distance, I am going to, completely not thinking about it, go, oh, a bun. And and he lost it. And he was like, never change.
There's no helping you.
I would like to answer why the manic pixie dream girl subject means so much to me, because it feels quite topical in this moment.
Yes.
So I was homeschooled, came out real awkward, was super off-putting because I was socially extremely challenged. A couple of friends helped me out a bit, started navigating the world, pretty quickly began making my living as a sex object. Later a sex icon. And a couple of years ago, I was talking with this photographer. She's Russian, moved to Belgrade after Putin's war started. We wanted to work together. And we were trying to figure out like what we kind of wanted to play with thematically. And I was like, well, you know, in porn, we have the girl next door in the bottom left, top left, the MILF, right? The girl next door grows up into the MILF. And we also have the manic pixie dream girl, bottom right, which is like, you know, the like alt porn, Suicide Girls, Joanna Angel, myself. Except much like Girl Next Door, there is sort of an age limit. And I don't know what manic pixie dream girl grows up to be. And I got to figure it out, because now that everything is so public persona driven, I'm like, yeah, great. I transitioned to being a writer and an intimacy coach at a time when, to do either of those things successfully, I still have to be very much visually out there in the public eye. And so I wrote a whole thing called Performative about the showgirl. Like the showgirl like archetype. I put it in the group chat for show notes. But it has this like immense sort of personal curiosity for me of like what happens when one is no longer girl but still has these ingrained manic pixie dream qualities that, you know, at 25 everyone in America thought was quirky and adorable. But at 35, they're like, can you please just be normal? And I'm like, I literally cannot.
Yep.
Like,
yeah,
I've
you're
tried
just like,
to
that is
study,
not in my programming.
Yeah, like I have obsessively tried to study how to normal for most of my life, and I'm just not that capable of it. Like, I know what I should do, and it's just not how it goes
my
down.
goodness. Like that's such a precious line. It's like, I feel like that's a line that contains within it its own answer to the question of what I've studied obsessively, the concept of normal for some. Like, oh, this is like when I was doing my autism diagnostic assessment, I've been reading about it for a while, because in the UK it's, you know, you wait like 3 years. I think I waited, I was fast tracked. I waited only a year and a half, I believe.
Yeah, the carpool pass to autism.
Yeah. But I got all these questions and I was like, well, that one's out of date. And I know the kind of correct answer to that one. So I provide, along with the answers, because I'd read about all these tests, I provided a little helpful extra codex explaining my own personal biases, because I didn't want to foul this test because I might not be autistic. And then, like, well, you know, questions 3, 19, and 22 are actually out of date in their phrasing. So I don't know how to, there's really people, you can't answer that with any accuracy, really. But here's how it might be worded. And, you know, it was a helpful codex. And he's like, well, that codex was helpful. Maybe not in exactly the way you intended.
He's like,
fact
maybe
of the
not the way you
codex.
intended.
It's like, I must explain myself. I must explain.
That was like when someone was questioning whether they were autistic, and it was a friend of my partner's, and my partner was just like, "Oh, maybe you should like meet up with Pam for a quick cup of coffee and have a chat." And they rolled up with a notebook full of notes about the why or the why nots and their research upon it. And they presented this notebook to me, and I was just like, "No, you're autistic." And they were like, "What? But you haven't read it." And I was just like, "No neurotypical person is going to roll up to a coffee about whether they're autistic or not with a notebook about why they may or may not be autistic. No neurotypical person is sitting there like doing this. That is the whole test right there. You have passed. Welcome."
Yep.
But I was just like, yeah, if you don't have these traits, no one sits around thinking about that to that
Apparently
extent.
not. Apparently, it's yeah. I'd often thought about it, but I realized that I couldn't be, because like all of those like doctors I got taken to see as a kid would surely have spotted something. And like, you know, my parents, who were reading a lot of books about autistic kids for some reason, would have said something. And then I was like, hang on, my mum actually didn't read a lot during my childhood. She reads a lot now, but it's like, why was she always reading these books about these sad little boys? And I was like, oh, everybody knew but me. Everybody knew but me, it turns out.
Well, and very much like this touches on why this is an important podcast in general for me, but like an important introductory episode, is that so much of like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope and like the diagnostic criteria and things like that is based on other people's perceptions of us as opposed to our experience. And so if we're perceived in a certain way that matches how people perceive, also for the main part, how they perceive young cis white boys, if we match that perception, then we're more easily diagnosed. But there are so many people that do not match that perception, but have the internal experience that resonates with like different things in the neurodiversity umbrella, be it like, you know, a highly sensitive person, autistic, ADHD, like
Indigo Child. That was one of those ones.
Yes,
wasn't it?
or changeling, fey child changeling, like all those myths are of how people experience us, which by the way, I totally have a pet theory, and I'm sure that there's research on this about how fey changeling was actually based on the skill regression that's typical in autistic toddlers.
Yes, that's pretty well known.
Okay, cool. I was just like, I think that someone researched this because
I
like,
didn't know, and I'm so interested.
Okay, I just want to say to both of you that I think this is, again, one of those things, like we'll talk about collective intelligence another time, but the field of like academic folklorists, the overlap between academic folklorists and people with undiagnosed autism may be a circle. I couldn't say this for certain, but like I know a bunch of folklorists, and I'm like, I don't think so. Why might you be interested in these strange monsters?
Why? Yes, why indeed. Same with Jungian psychologists, but that's a whole other topic, which I love.
Can I tell you my favorite Jungian psychology fact before we move back to a thing?
Yes, and also then we should also check on time, because I know that Jess has a time thing, and I think you have a time thing, and I have a much later time thing.
Time is an illusion.
It is a fancy lie.
Time is a fancy lie.
Okay. Time.
I love the jazz hands.
Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. My showrunner, my amazing showrunner, Meredith Glynn, just goes whoosh, 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 whoosh. It's great.
Wait, you had a fun fact. What was your fun fact?
So, I think her name was Julie Myers. You probably know this. Who invented the Myers-Briggs test?
Yeah.
Julie Myers. Before she became a psychologist, she wrote erotic, Freud, and Jung /fiction.
Hold up, what?
Yes, she did. She was like, what if Freud and Jung, but what if they touched beards? And this is 100. I found this out from the LRB. It's crazy, and it was just buried in an article about her, and I was like, hold up. I'm going to need to know so much more about this real person.
This needs to go in our show notes.
Yes, 100%.
Flag for our show notes.
But yeah, I want to come back to what Jess said about the issue of like, what do you do now? What do you do when girl is no longer a headline part of it? I mean, for me, I am no longer identifying as a woman girl thing. And it's been, honestly, that has been a bit, even more so than with the neurodivergence. I was like, I'm non-binary now, and everybody who knows me was like, "Oh, what a surprise! Wow, so brave. Nobody could see that coming." And then, apart from
Who could have
who could have
anticipated?
possibly guessed? Like, finally, thank you. Okay, good. But
I just
yeah,
remember Molly's shell game portrait of you
oh
where you
yes,
look like a little toy soldier.
I'm a little toy
And
soldier.
yeah.
Ah, lovely Molly. But it's very sorry. Yeah, the issue of how do you build a life beyond those kind of tropes? Because sometimes tropes are not true, but they are real. You hang on to anything that might make you, well, maybe this is, now I'm saying it, maybe it's even more important for people like us to hang on to any way of making ourselves legible to the rest of the world. Anyway,
Yeah.
any story that feels like it might fit.
Well, yeah, because often when we give people the wonderfully chosen gift of our words, they're like, I'm going to throw the gift away along
Yes.
with a receipt. What was the secret message?
It's, yeah, what's the secret message? But they can understand, but what if there's nothing, what if that trope runs out? And I think some of it, I'm gonna say something that's maybe a little triggering. So if you guys want to like cut that, we can not do this. But like in my research lately, I found out some really just very upsetting statistics about, in particular, women and queer people on the autistic spectrum.
It's grim.
It's really grim.
Yeah.
The highest, the most common cause of death by far is suicide, and the preponderance of different kinds of mental health difficulties and like in endemic, so not endemic, social issues that compound each other, like, you know, addictions, housing problems. This is a very, very common experience. And I think I was looking at this and being like, I think what's meant to happen to us is we're meant to sort of die or fade away or kind of be used up. I think that's what's meant to happen.
Well, in our current structure, yes. In previous structures and other structures, no. Like I think about in previous structures, it would be like, hey, you know, James that doesn't speak but is real good with running in circles with the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Love James. You know, Mary that she just likes to recopy the same manuscript over
Yep.
and over again and wear the same dress every day. Thanks, Mary. Now we have a lot of copies of those books.
Your sister
Like,
who's a nun.
yep.
The
It's kind
lady,
of
the
like,
lady who makes friends with the ravens and knows everything about herbs, super important for community health.
Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Is there an opening for local witch?
Exactly. And it's like without those, if we are, and that's why, you know, I frame disability in context,
Mm-hmm.
is that we are currently geared towards one neurotype in our society, which is to our disadvantage. Like not dunking on neurotypicals, but it's like if you are only geared, like for instance, if we were only geared towards autistic individuals, it would also go similarly wonky.
Oh, yes.
Like it's like what you need is, or at least what I believe you need, is embracing neurodiversity, because then people can, you know, be of great service to themselves and others, feel self-efficacious, feel safe, all those things, when you are not just mono-focused on one kind of neurotype, one kind of interaction, one kind of strength.
And it's a standard that even a lot of neurotypical people find it incredibly hard to fulfill. Like, it's not just people with ADHD who can't concentrate right now. It's
Right.
not just autistic people who are overwhelmed.
Right.
And there is in many ways, we're the canary in the coal mine
Yes.
of modern society. There's a
But
very
also,
important. Yeah, go ahead.
as much as there's the neurospicy spectrum, that's only half of the whole spectrum with neurotypical people at the other side. So a lot of people, they're a little bit spicy.
Yep,
Just a
little
little
spicy.
bit. And they stick it down in a corner of their soul and they navigate the world easily because it's just a little bit and they can
And I'm
shove it
jealous
down.
of them. I'm jealous of them. I wish I
Same.
wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know that life, but like it's much like when someone asks me like what a neurotypical person is like, and I don't believe that there actually is someone that is strictly neurotypical. I mean, I've never met them. I do believe that there are some people who are more of that neurotype than other, but like I do think that, like you said, it's geared to this impossible standard of like this platonic ideal of even what that neurotype is that no one actually is. that?
It's like, I mean, you talk about the intersection with gender. It's about the distress of our mother's generation with the idea that you could be the superwoman who would have it all.
Yeah.
And which, of course, was a lie for so many reasons. But actually, even for people of a class and in a situation where that was technically possible, it takes a very specific personality type to be able to do it in any way. And then the idea that that ideal should be the standard is, it's I don't know. There's a very important book by Robert Chapman, who is an autistic philosopher, called Empire of Normality. It came out last year.
Oh, yes.
They are a wonderful, wonderful writer, and they talk about post-Fordism as a mass disabling event. So, yeah, the idea that they say these living conditions and these cultural norms, they make people who are on the more neurodivergent end, they make people who are neurodivergent more disabled, and they make people who are able to cope with these norms increasingly unwell.
Yes.
And we're seeing that with so many people we know who are just really struggling.
Yes.
And it seems like the language of neurodivergence is in some ways a resistance mode, a little bit. Like I see all these kids on TikTok going, I'm autistic and this is what I need. I'm like, this is I would not be that brave. Like people talk about me saying brave things, like I could never do that.
Yeah.
I just don't think I could.
Well, and giving people this language, I see that with my nieces and with some of my younger clients, like especially like kind of bottom Gen Z, top Gen Alpha vibes, where it's like they will very plainly state it and unapologetically, because it's very Fiona Apple, this world is bullshit, that they have spotted that and they are no longer willing to play along with it, and they weren't inculcated in a way that they were supposed to play along with it. So therefore,
Fiona Apple's one of ours, 100% money on it.
Oh, hi, Fiona. You're great.
So
you know Fiona Apple?
I wish I knew Fiona Apple. I'm saying hi to her hypothetically, unless she's listening. Sorry.
We can tag her in the promo. But like, hey, want to see my cat's butthole? We love you.
To expand on what Jess had said about the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope and what comes next, like I joke about it, but it's true. It's like I am in a decade in which technically Manic Pixie Dream Girl behavior would be unacceptable. But I have just channeled into what I have dubbed immortal bog witch energy. That is where I'm going, I guess, is that like I much like you, I feel like me studying normal is like I've studied the blade and I'm still incompetent with it. Don't hand me the blade. Like it's not good. Where I'm like, okay, well, I can't go down that route, but I don't really have a roadmap for this route. So I guess I'll just make up my own roadmap. Where I guess it's kind of like now we get to see what happens. But I don't know what the trope for that is. There's like the trope of like the crone. There's like the Baba Yaga trope. There's, the art teacher trope. There's there's these different tropes, but I'm like
Professor Quirky.
Yeah, Professor
Don't have
Quirky.
a PhD.
A PhD
really feel
in
like
quirk.
I need a PhD to be Professor Quirky. I thought that'd be great.
That'd be great.
I have a mail order high school diploma and one UK university module of undergrad under my belt. And I have chosen quirky professor trope. And I don't care that I don't have the paperwork credentials. That's just my persona at this point in time.
I love it.
I think I'm going for probably friend of children and animals terrifies men, ? Like
I think I also terrify men.
I, for the longest time, resisted that. Like men are like, you're intimidating. And for a long time, I was like, why? That's so silly. I'm just me. And now I understand why men find me intimidating. And now I actually don't care. I used to worry about it. Now I'm like, oh, you think I'm scary? Well, that's nice.
Like, kind of power. I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm like, that seems like a you problem.
I think we actually, our generation and the Z's and Alphas get to define as we all age, we get to explore and define for ourselves what comes next. And then inevitably that will show up as a trope character in
Get to choose a
media,
new.
and then
Yes,
that upper right quadrant will be filled in.
we're
Yes.
the upper right quadrant we've been waiting for, is what you're saying. I haven't decided yet.
Are we Gandhiing our upper right quadrant into the world?
Oh. Indira Gandhi, yes. I haven't decided my archetype yet. But I think I've got a lot more me being angry to work through before that. And I do know that whenever I see the other pixies out in the world, I feel incredibly protective and angry on their behalf, because people do not show up enough for us, apart from the rest of us. We show up for each other. We're learning to do that more and more. But the idea that we don't have interiority is it's more and more upsetting to me as I watch how different people I know are treated, and this sense that we are to be used up and discarded. And I'm like, I'm barely even baked. I've just about figured out like how to manage myself and this complicated life I lead. I am absolutely not done. But it is, like you were talking about, Jess, the freedom to define things. That kind of freedom can be scary. All kinds of freedom are scary. And that doesn't mean it's not good. I just think there is a reason people like to have archetypes handed to them and to be told what to do and how to be. And it's liberating, but also a challenge.
I just realized that also probably why we are discarded in stories is that if we reach our final form, it's kind of like biblically accurate angels.
Oh, yeah. With the many limbs.
Exactly. Where it's like, once we actually do figure out the upper right quadrant,
Upper
there
right
we go.
quadrant.
Probably when we reach that, it is something that is like, we can't be put into the little box of Manic Pixie Dream Girl. And so that is probably very threatening.
If people don't want you to attain a certain form, there's probably a reason. I think it's reasonable to say.
So my attempt to figure out what's in the box is actually completely the wrong approach, because what goes in the box is not boxable.
Yes.
We've just unboxed. This has been an unboxing video.
Really long unboxing video. An emotional
Can we
striptease.
call it?
Exactly.
Can we call it unboxing the Manic Pixie Dream Girl?
Yes.
I love that.
Ooh, what's in here?
What's in the box?
Wow. Oh, quirky music taste. Oh, interesting. Oh, you.
Unboxing the Bene Gesserit version.
Oh my god.
What's in? Oh, pain. It's pain again. Oh, pain. My favorite.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Neuroprovocateurs. Please join us on Substack, where you can find exclusive clips, resources, and community of the neurospicy variety. We are an independent podcast, so know that your support on Substack and beyond means the world to us, quite literally. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave us 5 stars and glowing reviews, and follow our podcast on your preferred podcast platform so that you can be sure to get each episode the moment it drops, and know that your reviews help us get in front of other people who might also want to listen to this podcast. We are on social media in all of the usual places as Neuroprovocateurs. Thank you again, and excited to see you for our next episode.